A blind woman finds a bleeding stranger on her doorstep. She saves him, never knowing he's a millionaire on the run from betrayal. As their bond deepens in the dark, one truth threatens everything. What happens when the man she trusts turns out to the one everyone else is hunting? Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. Lily Harper moved through the quiet woods with a confidence most would never expect. At 26, she lived alone in a modest cabin nestled just beyond the old ridgeline, where nature's voice was louder than the world's. Blind since the age of 5, Lily had long since traded fear for intuition, silence for understanding. Her fingers knew every step of the porch, her ears caught the language of wind in trees, and her heart had learned to live without expecting much from anyone. That night, she was tending to the herb garden just off the kitchen door. The air was cool, thick with pine and damp earth. She smiled softly as she brushed her hand across a sprig of lavender, pulling in the scent, grounding herself in something familiar. Then cup shots. 3 sharp cracks in the distance, followed by a silence too heavy to ignore. She froze. Her grip tightened on the woven basket in her hand. She didn't move for several heartbeats, every part of her trained to listen. Nothing. No voices, no cars, just wind and shadows. She turned slowly toward the house, her instincts firing. Danger didn't always come with sound. Sometimes it arrived quietly. She stepped up onto the porch, her cane tapping softly against the wood. Then, the steps stalled, unsteady, fast, stumbling. Before she could react, something, or someone, collapsed at the edge of her porch with a ragged groan. Her breath caught in her throat. The scent of blood hit her before she could reach for the door. Copper and sweat, the sweat thick and unmistakable. She dropped her basket and moved forward on instinct. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. The man didn't answer. She knelt beside him, feeling for a pulse at his neck. It was there, rapid, uneven. He was burning with fever. Her hand moved to his shoulder. Wet, sticky blood. "I'm going to help you," she said softly, trying to reassure both of them. She didn't have time to ask who he was. Her training from years of living on her own kicked in. She pressed a kitchen towel to what felt like a wound near his ribs, then struggled to lift him, one arm slung over her shoulders. He groaned again, but he didn't fight her. Inside, she guided him to the couch, struggling under his weight. She grabbed a flashlight and clicked it on, not for her, but out of habit for visitors. She felt for the bleeding, deep gash along his side, not fresh, but not old either. She ran warm water in a bowl, tore one of her few remaining clean shirts into strips, and began to clean the wound. He winced, but said nothing. Still, she could feel his eyes on her, burning with something between fear and confusion. "Who did this?" she asked gently, dabbing the wound. "Does it matter?" His voice was gravel, low and broken. "O nutriarch," she replied. When she finished cleaning the cut and wrapping it tightly, she wiped her hands clean and sat across from him. The man hadn't moved much. His breath was shallow, but steadying. She tilted her head slightly. "Do you have a name?" A long pause. Then, "Jake." That was all he gave? "Jake," she repeated, then offered a small nod. "I'm Lily." He didn't answer. She stood and crossed the room, filling a glass of water. She placed it into his hand. He took it carefully, his fingers brushing against hers longer than necessary. His skin was rough but warm, tight and icier. "You can stay the night," she said, almost to herself. "Spare rooms through the hall, second door. Try not to bleed on the floor." His dry chuckle surprised her. It was the first sign of life he'd shown since arriving. Jake leaned against the frame of the spare bedroom door, one hand pressed to his side. Lily had offered no explanation, no questions, just action. Her calm unnerved him more than his own bleeding. He wasn't used to being helped, not like this, not without suspicion or a price tag. She handed him a folded towel and gestured toward the bed. "Sheets are clean. I wash them every week, even though no one ever comes." Jake didn't speak. He lowered himself onto the bed slowly, the pain in his side flaring. He didn't cry out. Years of holding back had taught him that pain was best swallowed, not spoken. Lily lingered in the doorway. She couldn't see his face, but she could sense the silence shift, like a storm refusing to speak. "I don't know what you're running from," she said gently, "but I won't ask. Not unless you want me to." He blinked. "Why?" "Because you're here," she replied, "and because someone shot at you." He studied her. This woman, slight in frame, dressed in plain clothes, and surrounded by the scent of herbs and pine, had dragged him inside, cleaned his wounds, and now stood at his door like some kind of guardian in bare feet. He didn't know what to make of her. Lily turned to leave but paused. "There's soup on the stove if you're hungry." Jake nodded faintly, though she couldn't see it. "Thank you." She smiled without seeing it and stepped away, letting him close the door behind her. In the kitchen, Lily's hands trembled slightly as she washed the basin. She hadn't panicked while patching him up, but now that the adrenaline had faded, questions started to flood her mind. Who was he? Why was he running? And more importantly, what would happen if someone came looking? She bit her lip. The quiet had always been her sanctuary, her shield. But tonight, the woods held a secret, and it was sleeping in her guest room. Jake didn't sleep easily. The bed was soft, too soft. The quiet wasn't comforting, it was unsettling. No city hum, no distant sirens, just trees and wind and his own heartbeat reminding him he was still alive. His mind replayed the chase, the car, the shouts, the betrayal. He should have been dead. Part of him still thought he might be. But then, there was her. Lily. The name stayed with him, softer than he expected. She didn't flinch at the blood, didn't ask for identification. He had met 1,000 people with polished smiles and cold hearts. But this woman, blind and alone, had seen him more clearly than anyone in years. Down the hall, Lily sat on the edge of her bed, listening. Every creak, every gust of wind registered like Morse code through her bones. But Jake didn't make a sound. Still, she knew he wasn't asleep. She could feel the restlessness in the house like an invisible pulse. She whispered to herself, as if confessing to the dark, "What did I just let into my home?" But when morning came, she didn't regret it. Jake sat at the kitchen table, his arm bandaged, the scent of fresh herbs drifting through the small, sunlit space. Lily moved with measured grace, her hands instinctively finding what they needed. The way she navigated the room, sightless yet confident, made him feel like the one with the disability. "You're quiet today," she said, her voice soft but firm as she stirred a pot on the stove. Jake shifted. "Didn't sleep much." He hesitated. "Not just that." She paused, her spoon hovering above the pot. "You don't have to tell me anything, Jake, but silence leaves room for ghosts." He almost smiled. "You speak like someone who knows." "I do," she said plainly. He leaned back, studying her. "You always live out here alone?" "For a while now," she answered. "I used to be afraid of being alone, but after the accident, I realized I wasn't really afraid of solitude. I was afraid of being forgotten." Jake looked down at the table. He could feel the sting in her words, the quiet truth of someone who had faced loss and chosen dignity anyway. "What happened?" he asked, surprised at his own voice. Lily didn't flinch. "Car crash. I was 12. My parents were arguing. I was in the back seat, clutching a stuffed rabbit. I woke up in the hospital with light, and then no light." That was the end of that chapter. Jake stayed silent. Lily continued, "But I still remember color. I dream in it even now. Red was my favorite." "Red," he echoed, almost to himself. She smiled faintly. "Don't worry. I've already guessed you're not some lost hiker." He glanced up. "I can hear it in the way you talk. You choose your words like someone who's had to hide behind them." Jake was silent for a long moment, then said quietly, "I'm running from something." Lily didn't press. Instead, she turned off the stove and poured soup into 2 bowls, then guided them to the table. She sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap. "Then this house is your breath between running," she said. "You don't owe me more than that." Jake stared at her, unsure how someone could be so composed in the presence of danger, even if she didn't know its full weight. Later that day, he insisted on helping her stack wood outside. His steps were cautious, but growing steadier. She gave directions with clarity, her hands guiding his to the right tools, the right angles. "Not bad," she remarked when he balanced a heavy log. He laughed under his breath. "I used to pay people to do this for me." Lily tilted her head. "And now you're doing it for free. Imagine that." As the afternoon sun faded, Jake found himself watching her eyes, how she tilted her head when birds chirped, how she smiled faintly when the breeze brushed her cheeks. He had met women with beauty, with intelligence, with ambition, but Lily's strength was something quieter, like the foundation of a house you never notice until it saves you from the storm. At night, Lily sat in the living room with her hands curled around a chipped mug of chamomile tea. Jake had taken to pacing, restless, still unable to sleep. The cabin creaked softly around them, the sounds of the forest whispering beyond the windows. "You can sit, you know," she said gently, not turning her head. He paused. "He knows always know where I am. I listen better than most." Jake settled into the armchair across from her. For a few minutes, the silence was comfortable. Then he broke it. "I had a brother," he began slowly. "Julian." Lily didn't interrupt. "He was the kind of person who made people believe in him without ever earning it. I thought we were building something together, our family company. I handed him more control than I should have. I trusted him, and when I wasn't looking, he took it all." Lily's fingers tightened around the mug. Jake went on, his voice harder now. "He forged documents, moved assets, cut deals behind my back. Then, like a magician, he made me the villain. I walked into a board meeting, expecting to approve a new partnership. I left, stripped of everything, even my name." Lily leaned forward slightly. "And now you're hiding." Jake nodded, rubbing the scar on his wrist. "Until I figure out how to expose him without ending up dead or in prison." She exhaled slowly. "That's a lot to carry." He looked at her. "You're not afraid?" "I've lived in darkness for over a decade," she said simply. "I've learned that fear only grows in silence. You gave it a name. That takes strength." Jake swallowed hard. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," she said. "But I don't need to see your face to know you're telling the truth." He let her words sit between them for a moment. Then he stood and walked to the window, the one facing the woods. His silhouette, lean and weary, was etched by moonlight. "But you should know something," he said. "If anyone ever comes looking for me, don't lie for my sake. Don't get pulled into this." "I don't lie," Lily said calmly. "But I also don't walk away from people who haven't walked away from themselves." The next few days passed in a rhythm. Jake began waking before her, brewing coffee and checking the perimeter. He mended the broken gate she'd left for years. He repaired the leaky faucet. Lily made no comment, but her brow softened when she listened to him work. A night they talked. About books they both loved, about songs she missed hearing, about dreams half remembered, half imagined. Jake learned that she'd once dreamed of becoming a classical pianist. She'd lost her chance after the accident, but her fingers still moved with a musician's grace. One afternoon, he brought in an old, dust-covered keyboard from the attic she hadn't touched in years. He didn't ask permission, he just placed it near the window. She found it hours later and ran her fingers over the keys. "I must do this," she whispered. "Because silence doesn't suit you." That night, as she played a halting melody with trembling hands, Jake sat in the doorway and listened. Each note felt like a confession, each pause a memory she hadn't dared speak. He didn't tell her then, but in that moment something shifted inside him. For the first time in weeks, he didn't feel hunted, he felt seen. And he knew, in the quiet of that fragile psalm, that Lily Harper was no ordinary woman. She was his shelter and possibly his undoing. The rain had stopped that evening, leaving the scent of wet earth in the air. Lily was in the kitchen, gently feeling the edge of a spice jar with her fingertips, trying to recall if it was thyme or cumin. She smiled to herself. Jake had teased her the day before for mixing the two, though he'd eaten the meal without complaint. In the other room, Jake was repairing the old clock on the wall. the one that hadn't ticked since Lily inherited the cabin. Music played faintly from the tiny speaker in the corner, a jazz tune, warm and brassy. Lily lit the gas stove, a routine movement done with quiet confidence. But this time, something felt off. A sudden whoosh of flame erupted, catching the hem of a dish towel that dangled too close. The fire flared. Lily flinched back, instinctively reaching out for something, anything, then froze, unsure where the flames had gone. Jake's shout came first. "Lily, don't move." In seconds, he was there, yanking the burning towel to the floor and stomping it out. Smoke curled upward and the alarm in the hallway wailed. Lily stood motionless, breathing fast, heart pounding in her chest. Jake turned to her, chest heaving, his hands smudged with soot. "You okay?" I didn't see it coming," she whispered. "I know," he said gently, "but you reacted fast. That saved you." She nodded slowly, trying to process the shock. He took her by the elbow and guided her to the kitchen chair. "Let me open the windows, get some air in here." As he moved around, pulling curtains aside and waving a towel at the alarm, she listened to the sounds. His footsteps, the creak of the window pane, the breath he let out as the fire died down. Then he laughed. Not a nervous chuckle, but a full, light-hearted laugh that made her pause. "What's funny?" she asked, still rattled. "You nearly got torched by a dish towel, and I've got smoke in my hair, and I swear this cabin alarm sounds like a dying cat." The mental image hit her out of nowhere, and a laugh bubbled up from her chest, unsteady and surprised. It escaped before she could hold it back. Jake turned toward her, eyes wide. Did you just laugh?" "I think I did," she said, breathless. Still shook yes. Paul still nodded, but still erratically. "That's illegal here, you know. Laughter after near-death experiences? Highly frowned upon." She laughed again, covering her mouth. "You're ridiculous. And you're a fire hazard, but I guess we make a good team." The air slowly settled around them. Lily's heart calmed. The fire hadn't harmed anything seriously, but something deeper had shifted. Later that night, after the dishes were cleaned and the stove double night, Jake sat on the front steps with his guitar. It had been in the corner of the cabin since he arrived, untouched until now. Lily came out quietly, sensing the shift in mood. "I didn't know you played." "Learned young. My mother loved old folk songs." He strummed a soft, familiar tune. Lily froze as the melody carried through the night air, gentle, haunting. "I know that song," she said softly. "You do?" "My brother used to hum it before the accident. I haven't heard it in years." Jake's voice was low when he began to sing. His tone wasn't perfect, but it was sincere. Every word seemed to land gently between them, like shared memory. Lily sat beside him, listening, eyes turned toward the stars she couldn't see. When he finished, she whispered, "Who are you, really?" Jake set the guitar down and replied quietly, "Just a man trying to remember who he used to be." The night deepened around them, the woods behind the cabin humming with the soft rustle of wind through pine. Jake didn't move, his silhouette still, as the last chord faded from his guitar. Lily remained seated beside him, quiet, hands folded in her lap. The weight of what he said lingered in the air between them. She tilted her head toward him. "You said you're trying to remember who you used to be. Does that mean you've lost yourself?" Jake inhaled slowly. "Something like that." "You don't have to tell me," she offered gently, "but I think whoever you used to be must have had some good in him. Otherwise, you wouldn't have jumped in front of a fire for a stranger." He gave a soft, breathy laugh. "You're not a stranger anymore, Lily." Her throat tightened at his words, unexpected in their warmth. She didn't know what kind of man he truly was, what he had done, or what he had run from, but in that moment, it didn't matter. He was here, and so was she. And somehow, that had started to feel like enough. Inside, Jake started to clean up the soot-smudged kitchen. Lily insisted on helping, wiping the counter slowly, her fingers moving with practiced grace. Their movements fell into a rhythm, quiet, efficient, comfortable. At one point, their hands brushed, reaching for the same towel. Neither pulled away immediately. Jake broke the silence. I don't think I've seen anyone handle fear the way you do. Lily looked toward him. Fear is just another sense, Jake. You can't see it, but you can feel it, hear it, taste it. It whispers all the time. You either let it guide you, or you learn to walk through it blind. He stared at her for a long moment, as if trying to absorb everything she just said. You make it sound so easy? It's not, she admitted, but I've had practice. Jake returned to the living room while Lily made tea. When she brought him a cup, she heard something new in his voice as he thanked her, softer, more present, like something inside him had begun to thaw. That night, he couldn't sleep. He paced the small hallway quietly, trying not to wake her. He stepped onto the porch, breathing in the cool forest air. But Lily was already there, sitting on the swing with a blanket around her shoulders. I heard your footsteps, she said. You pace when something's on your mind. He joined her without a word. The swing creaked gently as he sat down. He and I started a company together, he said finally. He was supposed to have my back. I trusted him with everything. Jake's jaw tensed. He sold me out, signed my name on deals I never approved. Embezzled funds. The board thinks I'm guilty. I left before they could arrest me. Lily didn't speak. She just sat there, listening. How it worked. I came out here to disappear. And then I found this cabin. Found you. And now, she asked softly. I don't know, he whispered. Now I don't want to leave. They sat in silence. Then Lily reached over and placed her hand gently on his. I don't know what your name means out there, Jake, but here, in this house, with me, you're just a man who protected me from fire, who makes me laugh, and who plays lullabies I thought I'd never hear again. Jake looked down at their hands, hers smaller but steady, warm and grounding. A part of him, the broken, betrayed part, didn't believe he deserved it. But another part, the one she'd quietly helped nurture back to life, whispered that maybe, just maybe, he did. Inside the house, the alarm clock ticked, but on the porch, time stood still. Thunder cracked across the sky like a warning shot, and moments later, rain pelted the cabin roof with fierce intensity. Inside, Lily moved slowly through her kitchen, her hands trembling more than usual. She had grown up blind, yes, but storms always undid her. The trauma lived in her bones. It was the sound, the sudden violence of it, the chaos she couldn't track. She had been 12 the night her parents' car skidded off the road during a rainstorm. The last thing she remembered seeing was a flash of lightning, the scream of twisting metal, and then blackness. Permanent blackness. She dropped a glass, it shattered, and her breath hitched in panic. Jake rushed in from the living room. Lily, are you okay? She backed into the wall, disoriented, her arms wrapping tightly around herself. I can't hear myself think. Without another word, Jake wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close. It's okay, he whispered, holding her like she was something fragile but worth protecting. I've got you. I hate storms, she admitted, her voice muffled against his chest. And quoth he, I used to feel the same, he said softly, rocking her gently. Every crack of thunder felt like a threat. But someone once told me, fear doesn't mean we're weak, it just means we're alive. She stood still in his arms, letting the steadiness of his breath guide hers. The storm still roared outside, but inside, something softer began to settle. I'm sorry, she murmured, embarrassed. Don't be, Jake said. You're allowed to break down. Just promise you'll let someone hold the pieces. Later that night, when the storm had quieted and the wind had lost its teeth, they sat by candlelight at the small kitchen table. Lily sipped warm tea while Jake silently repaired the lanterns with shaking hands. I should go into town tomorrow, he said finally. We're out of batteries, and coffee, and flour. No, she said quickly. Please, don't go. He looked at her. Lily, we can't stay cut off forever. You don't understand. The last time someone I loved left in a storm, she stopped herself, swallowing hard. I just have a bad feeling. Jake didn't argue, but she could see the tension in his jaw. He left early the next morning. The silence in the cabin felt different without him, heavier, watchful. Lily tried to distract herself, cleaning, folding, making soup she knew he liked. But the hours dragged. Each tick of the clock scraped against her nerves like sandpaper. Jake parked the truck on the edge of the small town 2 miles south, pulling his baseball cap low. He only needed a few things, in and out, no conversation. He kept his head down at the supply store, careful not to draw attention. But at the checkout, a man in line stared too long. "Hey, you look familiar." Jake froze. "I get that a lot." "Hold on, you're that guy, Whitmore, the missing Whitmore CEO." Jake didn't wait for more. He dropped the bread and batteries, bolted out the door, and sprinted to the truck. Tires squealed against wet pavement as he peeled away from the curb, heart hammering in his chest. By the time he returned to the cabin, night was falling again. He walked in the door with shaking hands and a haunted look. "Jake," Lily's voice reached out from the kitchen. "You're back." "I am," he said, quieter than usual. She took a step toward him, sensing the tension in the air. "What happened?" He didn't answer at first, just placed the bag of supplies on the counter and stared at the floor. Finally, he said, "Someone saw me, recognized me." Lily stilled. "Jake, who are you?" He exhaled. "My full name is Jacob Whitmore." The name lingered in the silence like a storm that hadn't quite passed. Lily leaned against the edge of the table, her expression unreadable. "Whitmore," she repeated, voice soft. "As in Whitmore Holdings?" "Yes," Jake said. "Or I was CEO. Until my brother staged a takeover and spun a story that I'd lost control of the company, and my mind—" Lily's hands gripped the wooden chair behind her. Why would he do that? Money, power, control. The board was already shaky on my leadership because I didn't want to go public with the company's next project. My brother promised them bigger profits. They believed him. "And the gunfire?" she asked. Jake looked down at the scar just above his ribs. "One of his private security goons tried to scare me. Got too close, I ran. Didn't stop until I landed here." Lily's fingers trembled slightly as they reached for the tea kettle. "You've been living here, hiding from a family that tried to destroy you." He nodded. "You deserve better than having someone like me crash into your life." She turned her face toward him. "Don't say that. You saved me. From the silence, the routine. You brought something back into this house." Jake's voice cracked. "If I stay, I'll ruin your life. I can't let that happen." She stepped closer. "And if you leave, you'll shatter mine. Do you think I care about your name or your past? You think I brought you in because I wanted a resume?" He stared at her, stunned by the fire in her voice. "I let you stay because I heard something in your voice that night," she said. "Not fear, not just pain, humanity. And I've lived too long in a world that forgets what that sounds like." Jake's eyes brimmed, but he blinked fast, unwilling to let them fall. "I didn't know I needed saving." "Neither did I," she whispered. He reached across the table and took her hand, carefully, gently, as though it might disappear. "I won't bring trouble here, I swear it." "You already have," Lily said with a shaky smile. "And yet, I've never felt safer." They stood like that, hands barely touching, neither one pulling away. The next morning, Jake was up early, chopping wood outside. The air smelled like pine and ash, and the morning fog curled through the trees like a secret. Lily stood on the porch, wrapped in her wool shawl, listening to the rhythm of the axe stroking the stump. He noticed her and paused. "Too loud?" She shook her head. "It's like music, strong, real. Everything out here has a sound I trust." He smiled faintly. "I've never had anyone say that about me." "Then you've never let anyone close enough to listen." Inside, they shared breakfast, quiet and warm. The radio played softly in the background. Lily hummed, and Jake listened. He watched how her fingers moved with certainty around the table, how she poured coffee without spilling a drop. She was a symphony of resilience and grace. He almost told her everything then. About how he used to dream of being more than his last name. About how his childhood was filled with cold dinners and colder boardrooms. about how he envied those who had less but lived more. But instead, he said, "What made you stay here, alone?" She looked out the window, even though she couldn't see. "Because here, I get to choose how people see me. Not for what I've lost, but for what I've built." Jake nodded slowly. "Then maybe I found the only person who sees me the same way." And in that moment, beneath the weight of secrets and storms, something stronger than either of them began to take root, quiet and unspoken, but impossible to ignore. Jake crouched beside the raised garden bed, his hands moving slowly through the damp soil. Lily knelt across from him, her hands searching by feel, unsure yet curious. He took her fingers in his, guiding them gently over the stalk of a young tomato plant. "This one," he said softly, "is green now, but soon it'll blush red. Not bright like a fire truck, more like the color of a sunset behind clouds." Lily smiled faintly, tilting her head. "I can't see red, but I remember the warmth of sunsets." Jake paused, letting her fingers linger on the leaf's edge. "You don't have to see it. You already feel more than most people ever do." Her hands brushed again, his calloused palm against her steady fingers. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let her fingertips move down his wrist, noting every nick, every scar, each one telling a story he still hadn't spoken aloud. They sat there in silence, the breeze shifting through the garden, a moment suspended in time, neither of them willing to let it end. Later, as they rinsed their hands by the water pump, Jake handed her a towel. "You're a natural," he said. "Growing things I can't see?" she asked, half joking. He replied, "At seeing things others overlook." That evening, as twilight settled over the cabin, Lily played one of her favorite records, a soft jazz tune filled with melancholy saxophone and slow piano chords. She sat on the porch swing, her head tilted back as she listened, and Jake emerged from inside, drying his hands with a kitchen towel. He stopped just behind her. "Mind if I join you?" She gestured to the spot beside her, and he took it. For a while they said nothing. The music filled the spaces where words would have felt too heavy. Then, her voice cut through the quiet. "I've never loved someone I couldn't see." Jake didn't answer immediately. He looked down at their hands, resting between them. Slowly, he reached out and covered hers. "Ernie House. I've never loved someone who truly saw me," he said. His words caught in the air like mist. Lily turned her head toward the sound of his voice. "Is that what this is?" He didn't answer in words. Instead, he leaned in slowly, giving her the chance to stop him. She didn't. Their lips met, softly, shyly. Not with fire, but with the uncertain ache of two people who'd been broken in different ways. When they pulled apart, Lily's voice was no louder than a breath. "I wasn't ready for that." Jake smiled faintly. "Neither was I." Inside, the fire crackled, warming the cabin. But the warmth between them had changed, growing deeper, quieter, and much harder to ignore. Later that night, as Lily slept in her room, Jake stood alone in the kitchen, staring at his phone. The screen showed a missed call, his brother, again. He hadn't answered the last 5. He knew what that meant. The search was closing in. He walked to the back window, barely breathing, the guilt pressed harder on his chest than the bullet ever had. She deserved peace. She deserved safety. And soon, he might bring neither. But how could he leave her now? How could he tell her goodbye, when his heart had finally started to remember how to feel again? Lily woke early the next morning, the scent of brewed coffee drifting through the open door. She stepped into the kitchen, barefoot and quiet. Jake stood by the stove flipping pancakes with one hand, while the other held a steaming mug. "You're up early," she said, her voice husky with sleep. "I thought I'd surprise you," he replied, handing her a mug. "Black, no sugar, right?" She smiled. "You've been paying attention." "I always do." They sat together at the small wooden table. Lily's fingers brushed the rim of her plate, feeling the texture of the pancakes. "They smell perfect," she said. Jake chuckled. "They're probably a little burnt, but I figured you'd be kind and lie." "I won't lie," she teased, "but I'll still eat every bite." There was laughter, easy, warm, like sunlight through trees. But beneath it all, Jake felt the weight he hadn't shared. His brother's investigators were getting closer. He'd seen tire tracks near the trail when he'd gone for firewood. After breakfast, Jake offered to help in the garden again. Lily agreed, and they spent hours side by side, him describing the shapes of sprouting leaves, her hands learning every inch of the soil. At one point, she reached for a tool, but he placed it in her hand before she could ask. "You always know," she said softly. "It's like you read my thoughts." He hesitated. "Maybe I'm just afraid to miss the moments that matter." They sat in the grass for a while afterward, her head resting on his shoulder. The late afternoon sun warmed the earth around them, and for a moment, it felt like the world had paused just for them. "Jake," she said suddenly, "is there something you're not telling me?" He stiffened slightly. "Why do you ask?" "Because sometimes you go quiet in a way that isn't peace. It feels like goodbye." His throat tightened. "I don't want to lie to you." "Then don't," she whispered. He turned to her, eyes dark with conflict. "Lily, if people come looking for me, if strangers show up here, you don't ask questions, you don't speak to them. Just tell them I left." "Are you in danger?" "I was," he said. "But not in the way you think." She reached for his hand. "I don't care about your past, only if it's going to hurt us now." Jake looked away. "That's what I'm afraid of." At night, while Lily sat by the fire, knitting in the soft light, Jake quietly stepped outside. He stared into the woods, the wind rustling through the branches like distant voices. He knew he should run, disappear before she could get caught in the chaos his brother might bring. But every time he pictured her standing alone on the porch, waiting for a man who would never come back. His feet refused to move. Inside, Lily sensed the change in the air. When Jake returned, she rose to meet him. "You were going to leave," she said. "Not a question, just truth." "I was," he admitted, "but I couldn't." She walked toward him, slowly, with purpose. And in that silence, no more words were needed. Even with the threat approaching, Jake stayed. Because sometimes, the heart decides long before the mind catches up. And Lily, blind, brave, unwavering, had already seen the truth he tried to hide. Jake had been restless all night, pacing the floor of the small cabin while Lily slept in the next room. The storm outside had passed, but its echo remained in his chest, uneasy and rising. Earlier that day, a truck had idled too long on the road near the woods. Jake had seen the tinted windows, the dark suits. They were close, too close. He knew what he had to do. By morning, he made Lily breakfast, eggs, toast, warm tea. But she felt the change in his silence. His voice was calm, too steady, like someone rehearsing goodbye. "You're doing that thing again," she said quietly. "The one where you disappear into your head." Jake's hands froze mid-motion. "There's something I need to tell you." She set her fork down. "I know." "No, Lily, you don't." He sat across from her. The distance between them suddenly felt miles wide. "My name is Jacob Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Holdings, or I was. I vanished after my brother tried to take control of everything, money, power, and what little soul I had left." Lily blinked slowly, her hands in her lap. She said nothing. "I ended up here, bleeding, broken, hiding," he continued. "I never meant to lie, but the longer I stayed, the harder it became to tell you." She inhaled deeply, her voice trembling. "You didn't think I deserved the truth?" Jake's head fell. "I was scared. Scared that if you knew who I was, what I've done, you'd send me away. I didn't want to lose what we had." She stood slowly. "You say you were scared? Try being blind, alone, and opening your home to a stranger in the dark, and still choosing to trust." Her words hit harder than a fist. Jake didn't argue, he couldn't. "I shared everything with you," Lily whispered. "Even the places that still hurt." "I didn't want you to see the monster I've become," Jake said, his voice low. "You're not a monster," she shot back. "You're a coward." Then she turned and walked out the door into the woods, her cane tapping the earth with each furious step. Jake didn't follow. The forest was quiet except for the rustle of branches as Lily moved deeper, her breathing sharp and uneven. Her cane met roots and wet leaves, but she didn't pause. The anger burned hotter than any fear of losing her footing. She wasn't afraid of being lost. She was afraid of having believed again. She had trusted Jake, trusted his silences, his kindness, the laughter they had built slowly over weeks, and it had all been wrapped in lies. A bird startled in a nearby tree. The wind shifted. She felt her cheeks wet, half rain, half tears. Back at the cabin, Jake sat on the porch step, the same step where she had first found him, half conscious and bleeding. Only now, it was his heart that bled. He had ruined everything. He should have left sooner. Should have never let himself. But he had. He stood, went inside, and pulled a worn leather bag from the closet. He filled it with the little he had, some clothes, a photo of his mother, and a folded page from Noah's journal, the company's former head of accounting, who'd warned him about the betrayal before vanishing. Jake didn't need anything else. He wasn't going to run anymore. He scribbled a note to Lily and left it on the kitchen table. Then he took one last look at the living room, at the blanket folded neatly on the couch, at the tiny potted plant she'd let him name. Outside, the sky darkened again. Thunder grumbled in the distance. Lily was already returning. The forest had whispered to her the way it sometimes did when she needed answers, not words. And all she found there was emptiness. Without Jake, the quiet was hollow. Her cane hit the porch step. She paused. The door creaked open, her fingers brushing the wood grain she'd learned to memorize with time. "Jake," she called. Then her fingers found the note. She read it by memory, her hands trembling. "I lied to you, and I regret it more than I can say. I was trying to protect you from the world I carry, from the storm coming after me. But I see now leaving won't protect you. It'll only break both of us. If you find this and still want me gone, I will be. But if there's even a chance you still believe in me, I'll be at the ridge. Waiting. One last..." Lily didn't hesitate. The cane tapped rapidly as she moved through the rain-slicked trail. She knew the way to the ridge by heart. It had been her place before it was his. The place where she talked to the sky, where she told her parents she was okay, where she dreamed out loud and cried quietly. Jake stood at the edge, facing the misty horizon. Raindrops clung to his hair and jacket. His bag sat by his feet. He turned when he heard her. She stood, soaked but unshaken, the wind blowing strands of hair across her cheeks. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't waver. "I don't need my eyes to know your soul," she said. Jake swallowed hard. "I was angry because I trusted you," she said. "But I still do, even now." He took a step forward. "I don't deserve that." "I probably don't," she said, cracking the smallest smile. "But I'm not here because you're perfect. I'm here because you were the only one who ever made me feel whole." Jake dropped the bag, walked to her. Their hands found each other in the darkening storm, steady and sure. This time neither of them let go. Jake stood at the edge of the forest, cell phone in hand, heart thudding like war drums beneath his ribs. The cabin's scent of cedar and the echo of Lily's voice still clung to him. But this wasn't about comfort anymore. It was about courage, finally choosing the right kind of fight. He dialed the number he'd once sworn never to call again. "Jacob Whitmore," he said when the line connected. "I have information, and I'm ready to talk." What followed was a storm of headlines and legal motions. Investigators flooded the estate his brother now claimed as his own. Financial records, falsified contracts, and forged signatures spilled out like rotted timber. Jake provided everything: paper trails, encrypted messages, even voice recordings. And when it was over, the truth stood bare. His brother had siphoned millions, using Jake's disappearance to tighten his... Jake was cleared within weeks. No charges, no wrongdoing. Only the weight of what was lost in silence. But it wasn't the verdict that haunted him. It was the silence from Lily. She had refused to leave with him. No promises, no goodbyes. Only that one sentence, whispered through a tight throat. "You have a world to fix. I just have mine." In the months that followed, Jake returned to the city. The Whitmore name was restored, but he wore it like an old coat that no longer fit. Every boardroom applause, every carefully crafted headline left him feeling hollow. He honored her privacy, never speaking her name to reporters. But in one televised interview, when asked what kept him alive during the darkest moments, Jake had simply said, "Someone who listened when no one else did." Back in the woods, Lily resumed her quiet life. She worked part-time at a school for blind children, guiding little hands across Braille pages with patience and warmth. The kids adored her. They called her Miss Lily, even when she let them giggle too loudly or tiptoe barefoot on the grass, just to feel the earth's breath. But at night, when the wind hummed like a forgotten lullaby, she missed the sound of Jake strumming the guitar, the way he would hum under his breath, the softness in his voice when he described colors she couldn't see. She told herself she had made peace with it, that loving someone sometimes meant letting them go, especially when they belonged to a world too loud, too lit, too far from her forest. Then one Thursday morning, a knock came at her front door. There was no one outside, only a sealed package lying neatly on the wooden step, wrapped in forest green ribbon. She felt its edges, fingers trembling slightly as she carried it inside. She sat by the kitchen table and opened it with care. Inside was a folded envelope in thick paper, Braille embossed on the front. Her name: Lily Harper. She ran her fingers across the raised letters, heart racing. Then, gently, she unfolded the page and began to read. "Lily, if you're reading this, it means I kept my promise. To wait, to never rush you, and to let you choose whether our story deserved a next chapter. You once asked me who I was. The truth is, I didn't know until I met you. You saw through everything, my silence, my lies, my name, and still you held my hand. You gave me peace when I thought I deserved none. The world knows me again now. The headlines say I've returned, but the truth is, I never left the forest, not really. I left my heart there. There's a plane ticket enclosed. No pressure, no expectations, but if you ever feel ready to hear the rest of the song I played that night, I'll be waiting. Forever grateful." Lily's hands trembled as she folded the letter back into its place. Beneath it lay a small, embossed envelope containing a first-class plane ticket to New York. No date circled, no deadlines, just an invitation. Her breath caught. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear his voice again, how the silence between them had grown louder than any argument. That evening, she stepped outside, letting the wind carry her thoughts toward the stars above the treetops. She whispered to the night, "I never saw you, Jake, but I knew you." And with that, Lily packed her things, not many. A scarf her mother had once knit, her Braille notebook, the dried leaves Jake had pressed between 2 pages the day they'd planted herbs together, and the guitar pick he'd left behind without meaning to. When she boarded the plane, her heart pounded like a bird finally remembering how to fly. In the heart of the city, Jake stood on the rooftop terrace of Whitmore Holdings. The skyline stretched wide behind him, but he wasn't looking at the buildings. He was watching the elevator. When the doors finally opened, Lily stepped out, guided by a kind hotel assistant who said gently, "He's right over there." Jake turned. He didn't move at first, just watched her breathe in the air, sensing her way forward as if she'd always belonged among glass towers and golden light. "Jake," she said, tilting her head. He walked toward her, voice catching in his throat. "It's really you." I read your letter," she whispered. "It felt like home." Jake didn't wait this time. He took her hands in his and rested her palm against his chest. "Is yours," he said. "It always was." And under the soft glow of string lights and city stars, they stood without speaking, 2 lives finally woven back together. Not by fate, but by forgiveness, truth, and the strength to return. Lily Harper stepped carefully through the glass doors of the new community center. The gentle hum of conversation, the subtle scent of fresh paint and garden herbs, everything felt unfamiliar and yet somehow right. Her cane tapped lightly along the smooth floor as a soft-voiced volunteer guided her toward the main hall. She didn't need to see the building to understand what it was. She could feel it in the air, the weight of gratitude, of purpose. Every corner of the place seemed to hum with care and intention. a haven for those like her. And the whisper of her name on the plaque outside still echoed in her mind. The volunteer stopped. "He's waiting for you. On stage." Lily's throat tightened. She hadn't seen Jacob since the letter had arrived, in braille, folded inside a small box carved from cedar. No return address, just a note in his own hand. "Come see what you built." She stepped forward slowly. The sounds of a crowd softened, replaced by one familiar voice. His voice ringing clear through the microphone at the center of the stage. "Eyes to think love meant seeing someone as perfect," Jake's voice trembled, low and unpolished. "But she showed me that love is what happens when someone sees you exactly as you are, and chooses you anyway." Gasps rippled gently through the crowd. Lily kept walking, each step tapping toward him, tears already welling. "She saved me when I was no one, when I had nothing left, when I wasn't sure I deserved anything more than silence and regret," he said, voice cracking. "She didn't need eyes to see my soul." She stopped at the base of the stage. Jake fell silent. Then the soft sound of footsteps. Their hands found each other. The moment their fingers touched, the noise of the world faded. Lily reached for his cheek, her fingers gently brushing the stubble she remembered. Her other hand found his heart. Its beat fast, real, familiar. "I still can't see you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Jake covered her hand with his, lifting it to his lips. "But I finally see myself," he said. In her palm, he placed something small and carved. A ring, smooth and round, whittled from the same wood as the box. Not flashy, not gold, but shaped with care, every ridge and groove meant for her fingers to feel. For her to know. "I wanted to give you something you could see in your own way," he said. "Something you could carry without ever needing to explain." She traced the ring's delicate edges, heart pounding. It was warm from his hand, as if it had waited just for her. "Lily Harper," he said softly, "will you marry me? Not because I'm a Whitmore, not because I've rebuilt what I lost, but because I've never been more whole than when I'm with you." She nodded, unable to find words for a moment. "Yes," she finally whispered. "Not because you gave me anything, but because you never asked me to be less." The crowd erupted into gentle applause, but neither of them noticed. In that still, small space, they only felt each other. She leaned in, forehead resting against his, tears wetting his cheek. Jake wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as if he would never let go again. And this time he wouldn't. They stood together for a long while before he leaned into her ear and whispered, "I have one more surprise." Lily smiled. "You've always had one more surprise." "Come with me," he said, fingers laced with hers. He led her carefully down from the stage, through a quiet corridor that opened out into a walled garden behind the center. Lily inhaled sharply as the familiar scent of lavender and rose greeted her. Jake stopped at a small wooden bench, then gently guided her hand toward a bloom. "Do you remember how you taught me to feel the petals? To name them by shape?" She nodded. "Now let me return the favor." Jake gently took Lily's hand and guided her fingertips to a new bloom. Its petals were broad and soft, curling slightly at the edges, still damp with morning dew. He cupped her hand around it with such care, as if presenting a treasure only she could truly understand. "Is one," he whispered, "is deep red, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that simmers, like the sky before a storm or a promise you've waited a lifetime to keep." Lily ran her fingers along the contours of the flower, the petals velvety against her skin. Her lips parted slightly as if she could see it in her mind, the color painted by his words, vivid and alive. He moved her hand to another. "This one's yellow, bright like a child's laugh, joy without apology, the color of new beginnings, of second chances." She laughed gently. "You always did have a way of describing things." He kissed the back of her hand. "You gave me the words, I just gave them back." They sat together on the bench, fingers intertwined, listening to the wind rustle through the garden. Around them, the sounds of children playing floated on the breeze. Somewhere inside the community center, volunteers read aloud from Grail books, and music trickled faintly through the open windows. Jake glanced over at her, her face turned upward, eyes closed, lips curved into a soft smile. "Want this?" he said quietly. Lily tilted her head. "You have it." "No," he said, voice tender. "I mean, I want this forever. Not just the garden, not just the center. I want every sunrise you feel, every laugh you hear, every silence you make beautiful." She turned toward him, her expression stilling. "You've seen the world I can't. Why would you choose to stay in mine?" Jake didn't hesitate, because when I was lost in the noise of boardrooms and backstabbing, I didn't know what mattered. But when I was bleeding on your porch, I found more truth in your silence than I ever did in my old life. Tears traced soft paths down her cheeks. "You showed me," he continued, "that being seen isn't about being looked at, it's about being known. And I've never been known like this." Lily reached for his face, her thumbs brushing the corners of his eyes. "Then let's never go back to what we were before." He smiled through his own tears. "Never." They sat in the garden until the sun dipped low and painted the sky in colors Lily couldn't see but felt all around her. In the warmth on her skin, in Jake's steady breathing, in the peace that filled the air like light. Later that evening, as guests mingled and lights flickered gently over the courtyard, Jake led her to the memorial wall just inside the center. Her fingers moved over the engraved braille, in honor of every soul who saw the world differently and taught the rest of us how to see. She paused, pressing her hand flat over the name etched below it, Lily Harper. Jake said nothing, just stood behind her, arms wrapped around her waist. In that moment, the silence was reverent. "Thank you," she whispered. "Evoked. Me bring him here, for giving him a place." Jake kissed her temple. "He's part of us, always will be." The next morning, Lily returned to the garden alone for a moment. She knelt beside the red bloom Jake had described and gently touched the petals again. She smiled and whispered, "I see you now." And from the entrance, Jake watched her, not with pity, not with awe, but with a love so deep it needed no words, no sight, no proof. Only presence, only faith, only forever.